Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Have you ever experienced pain with sex? Did you know that there's actually several different types of pain with sex? In this week's episode, we are joined by Christina Walsh, the co-owner of Tighten Your Tinkler, to talk all things pain with sex and your pelvic floor. Welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, the sex and intimacy podcast for Catholic women. My name is Ellen Holloway, and I am a Catholic speaker and coach who specializes in sex and marital intimacy. And I am on a mission to help you actually enjoy and desire good, holy sex with your spouse. Before we jump into the episode, I want to offer to you that we have a brand new, completely free download for you on 5 tips for less painful sex. So grab the link in the show notes to get your 5 tips for less painful sex download and start feeling less pain today. All right. Welcome, Christina, to the podcast. I am so excited to have you here and talking about this topic.
I am so excited to be here, Ellen.
Christina, could you just introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, my name's Christina Walsh. I am a licensed physical therapist. I have 2 little ones. I'm a mama and a wife, and I live in New Orleans, and my business partner does too. And her name's Jen Lorman. She is an exercise physiologist extraordinaire, an absolutely incredible woman, a mother of 3 as well. And we found our way to doing what we do now, helping women with holistic pelvic floor health, non-invasive pelvic floor care, because it was personal first, right? Like so many of us find our calling. And it was really gifted to us through our own journey. And it didn't feel like a gift for a long time.
Huh.
I'm sure many can relate to that. Yeah.
So much just in what I'm doing with like sex and intimacy and stuff like that. Like it was a gift that I didn't want.
Well, yes, but then that's the form so many of our greatest gifts come in hindsight. Only can we see it. And I had an orthopedic injury of my neck, and then I found the specialized body work that I got into. And then guess who ended up on my treatment table after I found that work? Miss Jen Lorman. And she was trying to heal from some rough birth injuries. And I went to work with her, and we were separate businesses under the same roof when I then had my kids and had injuries I needed to heal from. And we, as a PT and an exercise physiologist, we are nerds for what we do. Like, we are all in. We are committed problem solvers. We will not just accept what someone pitches us first. And like, Jen had tried Kegels, and she had been referred for major pelvic reconstructive surgery at 36 and was like, nope, not for this girl. And together, the 2 of us went on the warpath to find a different and better way to treat these issues and help women recover. And we did. We found a better way. And then our crazy behinds took on a 3-year university research study to test the protocol. And then the women in our study came back and were like, you need to make videos of this. We can't wait for this to move through the cogwheels of modern medicine. Like, we need this now. I have friends who need this. My cousin needs it. And we were like, we have to listen to these women. And so we formed a business together. It's Tighten Your Tinkler. Silly name, serious results for the tagline. One of our
I love your guys' tagline.
One of our clients helped us name it. We're not that clever and cute.
Whenever I tell like a friend about you guys, I'm like, just hear me out for a second. Don't laugh. It's definitely catchy. It gets your attention. You're like, I'm sorry, what?
And Jen, and
Tighten Your Tinkler,
right? Because we were like, okay, we want to be clear about what it is we're talking about without being like crass, and so that gets the job done. And now we're preaching the message of holistic pelvic floor health everywhere we go, because it has changed our lives, and we want all women to know what's possible.
Awesome. And so one of those areas that pelvic floor health really plays into is painful sex. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on today. We actually, it was probably like 2 years ago at this point, we had Jen, the other half of Tighten Your Tinkler, on this podcast, just kind of talking overall about pelvic floor health. So I will link that episode in the show notes if you kind of just want to get a general sense. But we're going to be diving into painful sex today. And let's just start off with, what are the kinds of painful sex that women experience?
This is a perfect first question. I think the first teaching Jen and I made on this subject on YouTube was, pain with sex, different types require different solutions. Because, I mean, you just instantly hit the nail on the head that it is not a one-size-fits-all problem, and therefore it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. And I know you've talked about this in various episodes already, and I love all the things that you've brought up, and those are all variables that are going to come up again, and then we'll bring that extra, perspective of the pelvic floor, specificity from our personal and professional experience. And so different types. The first and most common, biggest one we'll go into first, and I have the most kind of information to share on this, and it's pain with penetration. So pain at the vaginal opening where there's anxiety surrounding that. It feels too tight. It feels like maybe there's muscle spasms going on. And so that pain with penetration is probably the biggest one, the most common one, and the most painful one. That, Jen and I always say pain is a great motivator. And that's been our own story, right? Like when something's screaming at you, you have to do something about it. And something that impacts the most important relationship in your life at this level has to be addressed. There's nothing that screams louder. And Jen and I know from personal experience. And so that's why we can talk about this stuff from the heart and from a place of care, because we've lived it. And we've lived the different nuances of how this can feel and what you need to do about it. So that pain with penetration is the first one. It's the most common one. It's usually the most painful one. And not always, but often, this has to do with women who have what's called a hypertonic, or that's just fancy word for overtight pelvic floor. And the pelvic floor is just a bowl of musculature, right? It's not scary, or it's just muscles. It's just a bowl of muscles that holds your guts in from below, right? Very glamorous. But so
I love it.
Yeah. But so very often through the stretching and injury that can occur, especially through pregnancy and birth. Now, I'll just do a little side note here that you can have an overtight and hypertonic pelvic floor having nothing to do with pregnancy and childbirth and healing. And this is the holistic perspective of zooming back that viewfinder and looking at that whole picture, because many women don't know that things that can kind of set you up to deal with this later are things like chronic stress, because you're guarding and tightening against something. If you feel like you're always maybe about to be under attack from one thing or another, chronic stress can lead to overtight, hypertonic pelvic floor. A lifetime of chronic constipation or chronic coughing. So if you've had asthma as a kid, Jen has had asthma. So all these things, that downward pressure and straining through those muscles over a lifetime, also involvement in certain sports that exert a great deal of pressure on the pelvic floor. There's been research about cheerleaders being more likely to have pelvic floor issues. Not to say that if you were a cheerleader, you're definitely going to have this. I mean, this is things that have been noted to be connected. And what my intention here is to validate your journey. So if you're like, gosh, that's me, no wonder, because no one's connecting these dots most of the time for women. So then you have a pregnancy, then you have a birth, and maybe another one, and then another one. And that tissue has gone through so much. And sometimes in its efforts to heal, it gets too tight. And this is also why Jen and I don't recommend Kegels and internal devices, and we don't use them, because those things can even further exacerbate and increase that over tightening. And to be clear, this can be very confusing. A tight muscle, an over tight muscle, is also still a weak muscle, but it needs special care to be addressed properly. So lots of times this purported solution for this that women are being pitched is things that hurt, devices or manual intervention to press on and try to release knots in these muscles or stretch them like forcibly, dilators and things. I don't believe that that's the best option. I'm not saying it's never right. I think everything exists because it's right for somebody. But for those women who would really like to address this without having to be penetrated with devices or go through pain, there are other ways to coax those muscles to first relax and stretch. That has to be the first step if you're dealing with this hypertonic or overtight pelvic floor. We have to relax and stretch them gently. It is possible and not painfully. And then we add strength. Okay, so
Yeah.
a couple things are decompression technique. It takes the pressure off your pelvic floor, off your back, off your hips, and off your nervous system at the same time. Because if you have dealt with pain with sex, whether it started in the nervous system or whether it ended there because it hurt, as you've said so many times, and I could not agree more, you have to stop if it's hurting. Because if you try to push through it, it's only going to make that nervous system reaction stronger and more hard to break of this is going to hurt, this isn't right. And then you're going to clamp down further, right? And it's going to be hard to reach. Yeah.
Our brain is so powerful when it comes to anything, but then particularly when it comes to sex, because sex is a very intimate, very vulnerable situation that you're in. And if you have experienced trauma, which any pain is a traumatic experience, a low-level traumatic experience, or maybe it's extreme pain and it's a high-level traumatic experience. Any trauma felt, your brain is going to be like, I need to avoid that at all costs.
And it's a powerful protector. Right, which serves us well in so many capacities. I always try to come back to our bodies are always trying to help us. Because when you're dealing with this stuff, it can feel very much like what women tell us all the time and what Jen and I have been through emotionally ourselves. My body is betraying me. It was meant to give birth, to sustain pregnancy. What is wrong with me? And you feel broken. And I mean, I can become emotional because this is so deep. And so you have to interrupt that nervous system loop by, first of all, not pushing into it. And then by taking care of yourself, your body, and your nervous system from a place of gentleness, from a place of compassion. That is essential. And that is why, look, unless it's some kind of extreme case or you want to go down that road, that's why we never recommend devices that hurt or taking any kind of treatment path that further causes pain, because it's just counterintuitive. You know, I mean, like you said, from a brain science standpoint, it doesn't make sense. And there are other ways. Thank you for all that you've already taught on this topic. I could not agree more. And what you said also brought up, you can be predisposed to deal with this if you have had already a history of birth trauma or sexual trauma. And trauma is in the person, not the event. So give yourself a compassionate and grace-filled view of what that even means. Because if it pushed you past your ability to cope at that time, it was traumatic. I don't care what anyone else thinks or judges about what you went through. So that also can set you up to be more likely to experience this stuff. And so many women, the next question is, okay, I'm having pain with sex, but over tight, hypertonic pelvic floor, how do I know if that's what I'm dealing with? This is a great next question. And there are a list of indicators that, especially if you have a couple of these on this list, I would absolutely dive down this tunnel of treating it this way as a hypertonic or over tight pelvic floor, because you may not have all the things on the list we're about to go through, indicators of a hypertonic pelvic floor, but you may have a couple, and you may have some light bulb moments as we're going through this, like, oh, and I have the pain with sex. Okay, this is probably me. So number one, inner thigh or groin pain. It can also be front or side of the hip. Most commonly inner thigh and groin pain. Okay, why is this connected to a hypertonic pelvic floor? Because that is the pain that presents when the joint at the front of your pelvis, the pubic joint, is out of alignment. And when that happens, okay, look, I'm going to geek out with you for a minute here. I'm going to keep it simple, though. Okay, the pelvic...
I'm so excited.
The pelvic floor... And look, I normally get out my pelvis model when it's YouTube. I'm like, here's this. And here, so you can find us there and look at all the pelvis model talks. But so why is inner thigh and groin pain a sign of a hypertonic pelvic floor? Because of that pubic joint being out of alignment. Because the pelvic floor, the muscles have to connect to bones. Right, that's their anchor points. And the muscles of the pelvic floor, one of the pelvic floor anchor points is your pubic joint at the front of the pelvis. Makes sense, right? It's got to connect to the bones of the hips and pelvis. That's the muscles that hold your guts in. So it's connecting that pubic joint at the front of the pelvis. And if that pubic joint is out of alignment, again, your body's always trying to work for you. those muscles are going to spasm. They're going to try to grab and hold that joint so it doesn't get further out or really dislocate. So your body, in an effort to help you, if that joint is out, those muscles are going to go into a state of over tightening to try to help you. So what's your solution? There's a video where I quickly teach you how to check your pubic joint for alignment, and we can link to that as well. And the solution for this is going to see a Webster certified chiropractor. And y'all, this is not a scary technique to adjust this. It is external, it is not painful, and they are uniquely qualified to help you with this. Many women, many times we think of this as the pregnancy and postpartum chiropractic specialty, but they are specially trained to do a very gentle, effective adjustment at this pubic joint. And if you are nervous about chiropractors, there's a couple other options, but this adjustment is not scary. Jen and I have both had it done, and it will start to change the course of allowing that muscle to finally start to calm down, because it will no longer have to be protecting you against that joint coming out of alignment. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It really does. It really does. Yeah. Oh man, it's just so interesting how everything is connected.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. And so there's other indicators where maybe that's not you. Maybe you're not the groin or inner thigh pain person, but other ways you can know if you might be in this kind of hypertonic, overtight pelvic floor bucket is if you struggle to start the flow of urine. Okay, and if you've experienced this, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, yep. If you maybe have to kind of like bend forward or move around to get it going, like kind of shift around in funny positions, this might be you. If you have a dribble of urine after you've already peed and you stand up and you're like, I'm done, and then you leak, this might be you. Or incomplete emptying in general. So like some people, I've heard it called the second pee, where like maybe you don't leak after you get up from peeing, but you've barely gotten up and you're like, wait, I have to go again, like almost instantly. That can also be a sign of this hypertonic, overtight pelvic floor. Another one is less directly guaranteed associated than the other ones, but can be accompanying, is urinary urgency, that gotta go type of situation. Like you gotta go, but now you gotta go now. And another thing is urinary frequency, peeing more than 10 times a day, especially if it's really higher numbers like 20 or more. That can be an indicator of this. And also chronically tight hip flexors, also flat glutes and low back pain can be associated with this. So take that list as a whole. And if you check a couple of those boxes along with the tightening and painful sex with penetration, you are likely dealing with some amount of a hypertonic pelvic floor. And so you've got to take that decompression position, start implementing that 5 to 10 minutes every day. If you've got the groin or inner thigh pain, see that Webster certified chiro. Use that as a part of your care plan here. Then after all that, the next step then is to add functional strength. So this is a recipe for success if you're dealing with that type of pain with sex.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. That's fantastic. So then what are the other types of pain with sex?
Okay. The other ones are actually ones that, one of them is the primary one that I've dealt with, is one of the other ones that has bothered me the most is, and women use different words for explaining this. So I'm going to use all the words that I've used and I've heard other women use to describe this feeling. So many women, because we're stoic, right? We're the warriors and the moms and the leaders of our families very often, right? We're keeping all the balls in the air. So a lot of times women will not say this is pain with sex, but it's a nuance of this issue is that you often can have swelling, puffiness, soreness, heaviness, or feel tender or raw, more in kind of that in and external genitalia region, the whole pelvic floor, mostly after sex. So it's almost like you've been roughed up down there a little bit. And it wasn't painful often during. Sometimes it was. But sometimes you're just like, what? It didn't used to feel like this. Like, why do I feel heavy and sore and puffy and like raw down there? And that is often has to do with, okay, a couple things you can try to address this. You can try to add some lubrication. I know y'all have talked about that before, but the bigger issue here is just a lack of tone in the muscles of that area. So everything's just kind of hanging a little lower to begin with. And maybe it doesn't bother you in your daily life in any other way. Maybe it's just very mild, but that in and out, the slide and glide that's supposed to happen to make sex work and not be painful might be slightly changed to be something more like an accidental, maybe a little bit of suction, because the passage isn't as well scaffolded from the inside. If that gives a good visual.
Totally following you. Right? I hope everyone else is.
So I mean, look, we don't have to have a pen and paper to understand the visual here. So if you don't have that up and in support of the passage of the vaginal canal, you're going to get accidentally like a little suction effect happening instead of that full slide and glide. And when that happens, it does even kind of further drag things down, if you will. Yeah. And so that by the end or afterwards, sometimes you're like, oh, what is going on? I didn't used to feel this way.
Yeah.
And that just means you can add lubrication. You can increase foreplay time. All of those things that I've heard you advise are great things to try. But then if you're still dealing with this after you've tried those things, it means you're just lacking tone, that kind of up and in scaffolding support from the muscles in that area. And you want to rebuild that to solve that problem. In the meantime, use that decompression position also as your ally here. You can do that before or after or both. And that does help to kind of offload, depressurize the whole area. So that is another tool in your toolbox for that issue as well. But part of this is knowing and just understanding. And if you're like anything like Jen and I, we want to understand what is going on in my body, because then to me, that's the first step in feeling empowered to fix it and not feeling broken anymore. And, we also have a really wonderful freebie that we spent a lot of time and heart designing, and it is our Improving Intimacy Guide. And that just helps you strategically and thoughtfully be walked through the process of delineating what am I dealing with, and then finding a way to confidently bring that up to your spouse. Because look, I could sit here and talk to you all day about this, and I'm talking to other women here, and I feel very comfortable doing this. I can get on YouTube and talk about this stuff, but I will tell you, it was the hardest for me to talk to my spouse about these issues.
Yeah.
I think there's something, again, I'm going to get emotional. There's something about you are really looking it in the face in a new way when you bring it up to them. And maybe surely it's not just me that finds this so hard. And so but your spouse loves you and wants to support you, and they cannot know what this feels like unless you tell them, and they need specifics. Look, I had to explain menstrual cycles to my husband after we were married. He did not know, really. I mean, he had kind of a really basic kindergarten level idea. They don't know.
Yeah.
So they really don't know what your body feels like after you've given birth, or years later when you're still trying to figure out what's going on.
I think that's something we touch on so often, is it's just like, when it comes to particularly sex and anything having to do with sex, our experience is extremely different from our husband, because that is the gender difference. Like, how we experience sex, how we procreate is the difference between men and women. And so your experience is going to be absolutely different than your spouse. And your spouse doesn't know what it feels like at all.
No, and it's
we cannot assume.
No, I know, and it's so easy to assume. Sometimes it feels easier to assume, and maybe I'm projecting here again. Like sometimes I'm like, surely he knows. We don't have to have this talk, do we? Where I just have to like really sit in how broken I feel and like really tell him all of this. Like, oh, like it's hard. It's really hard, but you have to.
Yeah.
And they want to know, and they want to support you. And it is such a blessing it deepens your intimacy in the end. And that is why we called that guide the Improving Intimacy Guide, because it helps you walk through those first steps with guided prompts and reflection, so that you can feel confident going to him and saying, here's what I'm dealing with. And I promise they want to help you heal, get better, and feel supported. but they don't know how. And they definitely don't know how if you don't tell them what's wrong in the first place.
Exactly. And, I think one of the things too, just to touch on this really quick, and then we'll keep going on with our first question that we asked. I think we're just going to cover one question, is it can feel really embarrassing to just recognize and tell someone that you're broken in this area, or that you need healing, and just recognize that there is nothing to be embarrassed about. This is not your fault that you are experiencing pain with sex.
Nope. Is always trying to help you. So something that your body is doing is for you. It doesn't feel like it, but there are inputs that you can add to flip that switch and change things to move in the right direction and heal again. But yeah, it's conversation first, because they can't support you if they don't know.
Exactly. All right, let's keep pressing on with, I know personally there's at least one more.
Yes. Well, and so interesting. I was going to go into one more, but then I'm honestly wondering if your one more is different and you can teach us all something.
Let's chat. Let's see what your one more is and see if it's my one more.
The one more I had in mind is maybe the least common, but also maybe something that we can in our head far remove and think, oh, this isn't pain with sex. Almost like how women don't often call that after puffy, heavy discomfort, swelling, pain with sex.
Sure.
Oh, no, I'm not having pain with sex, but okay, but this is not right. So the other one is actually a higher up in the abdomen, like crampy, achy, sore feeling. And this is during sex. So it's different from pain with penetration, which is more at the vaginal opening more often. This is higher up in the abdomen. And this is literally because if you have any amount of, like we talked about, like that falling of the structures in the pelvis, the soft tissue, collapsing of anything, and the formal medical term for that is prolapse. But don't be afraid. It just means some of the soft tissue in there has lost its integrity, its scaffolding strength, and it's kind of collapsing and falling. So sometimes what this can feel like is, as you're in the penetration stage and the penis is up in there, it's like punching something that isn't in the place it used to be and has fallen a little bit. And so it almost feels like you're being jostled or shoved around from the inside up a little up higher in your abdomen. And so this often indicates some degree of that falling of the structures in there. But again, don't be alarmed by the word prolapse. It can feel scary. But if this is what you're dealing with, again, you can use that decompression position, but then also you really need to add that functional strength so that you're basically rebuilding that scaffolding strength of the passage itself and of the support of the internal organs through that functional pelvic floor strength, so that this becomes much less of an issue in the long term. And you can also lay in that decompression position in the meantime to kind of reset the happy place of all those organs.
Yes, calm everything down.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? Your one more is very similar to my one more, and I think that they're connected, but I think they can also happen separately.
Yeah.
So my one more is during penetration, if there is a pain or even a sickening feeling, that means that the penis has actually bumped up against the cervix. And so this could absolutely be connected to what you were saying, is that an overall loosening of everything. But particularly when the penis hits the cervix, there is a really specific, sick to your stomach feel, which can be so weird during sex. And you're like, why am I feeling sick to my stomach?
Yes.
This doesn't make any sense. And so, so again, that overall tone, one of the things I suggest for women who experience that in the meantime, and actually for women who experience, if penetration is still possible without pain, then absolutely continue having sex, but look into positions that are woman on top, where you can control the depth of penetration, or positions that just limit the depth of penetration.
Yes.
By the time this episode,
it is great.
Yes.
Like that. I've heard you talk about, like on the side. Yeah. So there are different
Yes,
ways
sideline
you can,
positions.
Yes, because it does by just a pure where the body parts are. They can't get as much of the power behind the thrusting or get quite as deep. So this is, modifying positions is a fantastic idea to work around some of this stuff, especially in the meantime, before you've been able to find a way to rebuild that strength. You still want to have your intimate life if at all possible. So all the things you've coached before, I completely agree with. And that is another great piece of guidance. And I love that extra layer of specificity. And I agree. It's kind of the same as that last point, but a nuance that
definitely
I'm glad
connected.
to have to bring up again.
Yeah, it's an interesting experience that some women have. And they're like, what is wrong with me? Why am I feeling sick?
Yeah.
During sex? And it's like, there's nothing wrong with you.
Yes. Yeah.
But, you know, we can seek out some healing here.
Yes.
Well, I mean, honestly, by asking that one question, we really kind of covered the whole gamut. Was there anything else, Christina, that you wanted to add in, or just, you know, how can women find out more about what you guys do at Tighten Your Tinkler?
Totally. So we always say, like, we have all the teachings on YouTube and Instagram and everything. So probably if you're wondering something or your interest is piqued, we've probably done a teaching on it, and it might be something you're scared to Google, but we've had a teaching on it. So it's all there, and we're everywhere. And if your interest is piqued about the unique way that Jen and I walk women through addressing the functional strength piece, that is all what I talked about at the beginning. The way we came to this work ourselves was in developing this new approach, and it is online, and that is what started this whole business, and it's called our signature program. And it's a really lovely way to address these issues from the comfort of your own home without penetrating your body with any foreign devices, with an external exercise tool and a routine that only takes a few minutes a day, because we're also busy moms too and needed it to be that way for ourselves first. So we have, of course, our website, tightenyourtinkler.com, has our freebies, and one of the really best places to start with this is our 5-minute root cause quiz. And so a lot of times you're listening, you're like, okay, maybe this is me. I've got these other things I think are pelvic floor issues and some other things I'm not sure are pelvic floor issues. This 5-minute quiz takes all the assessments we use in our research to track women's progress and turns them into an online quiz. So it gives you a report right away that tells you will likely benefit from this unique approach because your score falls in the same range as our research participants who all got better, or your score doesn't fall in that range, and here's what we recommend instead. So that is a really nice self-assessment tool, and it helps light bulb moments go off of like, oh, wait, that's connected to this too? Like, wait,
Yeah.
And maybe a little overwhelm in that moment, but also this ray of hope shining through. Like, wait, if it's all connected, I can address it all at one time. And that's the beautiful thing about a holistic approach that's non-invasive, is that you start to see that upward spiral happen. Like, women come to us to fix one issue and they get in that program and they're like, wait, but this is getting better too. Like I didn't know I was going to sleep through the night again and never have to get up to pee. Like, holy moly, I didn't know that was possible. So that's the upward spiral of a holistic approach. And that's why we love to offer this to women. And it is an at-home program. That is one option. Know yourself a lot. If you know you need in-person care and this at-home approach isn't going to be right for you, there are other options. Jen and I always say what a great gift that there are so many options now to address this stuff. Mm-hmm. We are just honored to provide one that is exactly the right fit for some women. So if your interest is piqued and you want to learn more about the program, our website, tightenyourtinkler.com. If you're just like, I need to learn more from these girls, our YouTube channel is at Tighten Your Tinkler. We'll spill all the beans about everything. And we're on Instagram at tighten.your.tinkler and all those places. And I'll make sure Ellen you have all the freebie links that we talked about. So yeah, we're everywhere, and we have an inbox too. So don't be a stranger. There's no such thing as TMI, clearly.
They are so fun to talk to.
And for your listeners,
I personally,
we have
Go
that
ahead.
special coupon code for $50 off the signature program. So charting 50, if you're like feeling called that this is absolutely right for you and you end up hopping in our signature program, charting 50 gets you that $50 off just for Ellen's girls.
Woohoo. Yeah. And I personally have used this and I loved it. It was fantastic. And I still, I upkeep as much as I can while pregnant has been a different experience.
It is interesting to always feel the way our body receives things differently in different stages.
Yeah. Because I discovered you guys between my second and third. So I'm pregnant with my third now. And doing the exercises pregnant, I'm like, oh, these are really different.
But, it's interesting. We didn't design it for pregnant women, but we've had a lot of members who joined between pregnancies and then used it while pregnant. And were like, wait, I don't feel nearly as bad as I did on the last one by the end of the pregnancy. So it, while we can't speak to the research behind that, we do know that it still anecdotally has helped many women through that as well. So it's just so cool what's possible when we give our body just the gentle nudge it already was looking for to heal. It's truly miraculous.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Christina.
Thank you, Ellen, for all the work you do supporting women.
Thanks so much for listening. If you are not already following us on Instagram, be sure to check us out at Charting Toward Intimacy. And if you listen to podcasts on a platform that gives you the option to rate or review, we'd love for you to do that because it helps us spread the word about the podcast. If you ever have questions, comments, or episode topic ideas, please reach out to us. We love to hear from you. You can reach out on Instagram or send us an email. Our email is in the show notes. Until next time.